and welcome back to the course that is devoted to Catalan. If you want to learn more details about Catalan, this course is for you. And particularly in this section, we're going to analyze this position, and then I'm going to show the examples of games played by top grandmasters in this position, where first black took on c4 and then he played c6. Let me show how it happened. d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, g3, and his fourth move is d takes on c4, after what we play bishop g2, c6 now, and in this position I recommend you to play knight e5, attacking the pawn on c4. And these are typical moves that black can play here. b5, c5, knight d7, and bishop b4. Let's start with b5 move. So b5, then we play a4. We want to take on b5, especially taking it into account our bishop g2 location. Knight d5 to close the diagonal. Castle, bishop b7. What do you think how to continue in this position? Should we play knight c3 or a takes on b5? How would you play if you were white? Here, e4, this is the strong move. Knight retreats to f6, for example. Knight c3, attacking here. And in this position, a6 is likely to be played, but another option is b4, and we should also analyze what to do in this case. If so, you can play knight e2. What black can do after that? Actually, one of his plans is to play c5 in such positions, so why not c5? Then we'd better play bishop g5. And here he has a choice to play knight d7 or bishop e7. If bishop e7 here, then we just take on c4 and continue playing this position. For example, he can't capture on e4 because we take, queen takes, then we play knight a5 to be able to take on b7. Then we play knight a5 to be able to take on b7, and it will be difficult to get rid of this pin. If here he plays bishop d5, then knight f4, attacking on d5. And here white's position is much better. We can also play rook e1 to increase the pressure on the e-file. Okay, so that was bishop e7 move. After knight b to d7, we can just take on c4. That's fine. The pawn is no longer hanging while there is a pin. The knight on f6 is pinned, so the position is slightly better for us. Instead of b4, a6. a6 is actually the main move in this position. a6. How would you continue after that? What do you think we should do? Here we have to play aggressively. d5. c takes d5, e takes d5. Then knight takes on d5. If he just takes with the pawn, we can capture on b5 or play rook e1. So knight takes. What's our next move? Our next move here is queen h5, attacking on f7. g6. How would you play after that? Here you may play knight takes on g6. He has to capture with the f pawn, but then queen e5. And if rook moves to g8, then queen e6, winning the rook. Oh, of course, after that he may play knight e7, protecting the rook, but then he blunders the bishop on b7. That's why the best option here is to play queen f6, but then queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and bishop b7, rook a7. And here, of course, we may retreat. However, the best continuation, by the way, what is the best continuation? What do you think? What white can do instead of moving his bishop back to g2? If you want, you may pause the video and then just think about the next move for white. Okay, let's continue. Let me show it. It's a takes on b5. So he can't capture the pawn, and if he takes here, we just take on a6 with the idea to promote a pawn. And the best thing he can do is to sacrifice his knight for a pawn, because if he plays rook a7, then knight b5, rook a8, knight c7, and if something like bishop c5, just bishop to e3 to trade this bishop, and then still attacking on a7 as well as on f6. That's why here knight a6 should be played. And from here it's clear that white is better, his pieces are better, and his pawns are located much better. The e6 and c4 pawns are weaknesses. For example, king f7, rook c6. Looks like here black has to sacrifice the pawn on c4, bishop g7, rook c4, and white plays with extra pawn. Of course, nobody guarantees that this endgame can happen in your game, but even if it happens, you will be playing with extra pawn with high chances to win. If not, maybe somewhere here black deviates from this variation, but anyway, just remember that your position is better, and any ideas that you may implement can still keep the position better for you. And if black here makes a mistake, he can even lose the game. Okay, let's go back. It was b5 moved. Okay, let's go back. It was b5 move, and after this move we react with a4. And the next move we are going to analyze in this position is c5. What if he plays c5 immediately? Here I suggest you to give a check on a4. This is an interesting move. How does he play? Of course, knight d7, because if he plays with the bishop, then we can just trade and take the pawn on b7 with our bishop. So knight d7, knight c4, winning the pawn back. Here, bishop e7, for example. If here c takes on d4, we can castle. Then maybe bishop c5. Something like b4 might work. Then bishop b2. Something like b4 might work here. Then bishop b2. So we are likely to win the pawn back. And if he moves the bishop here, then d6 is unprotected. So that when we play knight d6 check. So that's why bishop e7. D takes c5, bishop takes c5, so he lost a tempo. Castle, castle, knight c3, knight b6, queen b5 with the idea to attack the bishop. This bishop is more important than the knight on c4. If he takes on c4, we of course capture the bishop. Queen e7 to protect it. Knight b6 now. Bishop has to take, bishop f4. Bishop d7, queen d3. Now we control the d6 square. We want to win the exchange by playing bishop d6, rook f d8. That's why bishop d6, queen e8. Then bishop b7. He can't play with his rook. We will capture it. Bishop c6. Then bishop e8. And if he captures with the bishop, it's fine. We just play rook a to d1 to save our bishop on d6. If something like this, how would you play? Oh, here it's just okay to play queen a6. However, we can also analyze bishop c7 option, because I can show you. Bishop c7, he trades, then we capture with our rook, threatening to play rook to d8. So the weakness of the back rank here is an important factor. And if knight d5, we can trade and then play e4. Okay, let's go back. So, for example, e5 in this position, then just queen b5 to trade the queens and to get rid of the pin. If after bishop e8 he captures on e8 with his rook, then anyway rook a d1, then anyway rook a to d1, and here we are better because of extra exchange, and we also have one extra pawn. So that was c5 move, and I recommend you to play queen a4 here. So c5, queen a4, knight d7, knight d7, knight c4. Of course, I recommend you to pay more attention to c takes on d4, castle bishop c5 and b4. You can analyze this line yourself. Okay, let's now cover another line. Knight b to d7. If so, we just take on c4. Bishop e7, castle, castle, knight c3, knight b6. In this position, I don't recommend you to trade on b6. He can capture with the queen. Maybe it's not a good idea to activate the queen. So let's just play knight e5 back. Knight f to d5. Here we don't play e4 right now, but we prepare. Here we don't play e4 right now, but we prepare this move. First queen b3. If knight d7 with the idea to trade the knights, here what do you think? Should we trade? Of course not. We just retreat to d3, where we can cover all the important squares we need. And after something like b6, we are ready to play e4. He has to take, otherwise knight d5 didn't make any sense. B takes on c3, and we have a strong pawn center. The position is really good, especially if here you see that the number of pawns is equal. So we have a strong pawn center, bishop pair, and his bishop is not developed yet, but he plays bishop a6, and we have to play c4. After c4, black can play b5. We take. It doesn't make sense to take with the pawn, because if so, he weakens the diagonal, and at the same time he restricts his own bishop. That's why bishop takes on b5, rook d1, knight b6, and here the key move is knight b2 with the idea to play a4, a5 to get rid of his pieces. Then we develop our bishop to e3 to control the c5 square, and we can also locate our other rook on c file, or maybe we need this rook on the a file to support the a pawn, and in this position we are slightly better. So you see, knight d7 also doesn't help black to equalize the position. So here we reply with knight c4. Here we reply with knight c4, and then we prepare e4 move. Let's go back. What if bishop b4, what is considered to be the main move in this position? Here I don't recommend you to block on d2, because then queen can capture on d4. That's why the only logical continuation is knight c3. Knight d5 to increase the pressure on this pinned piece. Bishop d2. And in this position he has three options. To take on c3 immediately with his bishop, to play b5, or just to play knight to b6. Let's start with b5. If so, you can just castle. Bishop c3, b takes on c3. We are preparing to play e4. Then bishop b7, and yes, our next move is e4, then f4, and we can start the attack on the king side. Here we are still down a pawn, but at the same time all of our pieces are developed, and the attack on the king side can be really strong. If here, instead of playing bishop b7, he castles first, what do you think we should do? Actually, we can do the same thing, to play e4, f4, with a counterplay. So at least here we have a compensation for a pawn. Let's go back. Instead of b5, he may play bishop takes on c3. Of course, we take with the pawn, because the knight on d5 can be the object of the attack after e4. And it's better to keep more pieces on the board in such a case, because it's white who controls the space in the center as well as on the king side. That's why it will be difficult for black to maneuver with his pieces. b5 to support the pawn on c4, a4, bishop b7. And in this position we play such a typical move as queen b1 to increase the pressure on b5. This move also contains the idea to play knight c4, because then the pawn is pinned and bishop on b7 will be hanging if b takes on c4. Queen b6, e4, knight f6, bishop e3 with the intention to play d5. I don't really understand what he can do here to save the position. So maybe he should play with his queen, queen c7, but then he loses the pawn on b5, and after that we are much better. So he can castle or play knight b to d7, but if so, we play d5. What can he do now? Actually two options, to play c5 or queen c7. These are the most logical continuations. For example, here queen c7. If so, d captures on c6. If he takes with his bishop on c6, then knight takes, queen takes, and we can take win a pawn back by taking on b5. And the position will be almost winning for white. If he tries this, then first a takes on b5. Castle, castle. It's still a fork. We can take a piece anytime we want. Queen c7, then we take on b7 and get a bishop pair. Then maybe something like rook a5 can be played, or something like queen b4. So any of these moves. The idea is to increase the pressure on a7 as well as on c4, and also to open both our bishops. If he plays e5, we can just play f3 and activate the light squared bishop through the f1 square, and later take the pawn on c4. Okay, I just demonstrated you queen c7 move. What if c5? Knight d7. Knight d7, queen b5, winning the pawn back. Queen b5, a takes on b5. E takes d5, e takes on d5. What do you think? Who is better in this position? Well, definitely it's white who is better because of a bishop pair. The number of pawns is equal. Black pawn structure is totally ruined, while the d5 and b5 pawns both are strong here. So, for example, knight e5, castle. Okay, let's go through this variation, knight b6. And in this position, knight e4, this is what is recommended. What can you say about queen d4 move here? Does it work? Of course not. Why? Because bishop b4 and queen e5 doesn't really make any sense. Here, just knight d6. Then king has to move to the square where we can just apply a discovered attack by moving our knight. For example, knight c4, and this is how we gain the queen on e5. Of course, there can be many different combinations. We may start with knight c8 first, then repeat the position knight d6, and after that take the queen. Also, black can blunder checkmate if he plays incorrectly. So queen d4 of course doesn't work. That's why bishop d2 should be played. Queen d2, now the pawn is protected. Castle, rook c1. This is how we want to take on c4. Knight 8 to d7. Here, yes, we may take on c4. This is a possible move. But it's recommended to play knight d6. because if now he takes on e5, we capture with the pawn, and then we have a strong knight on d6. It works like an outpost. And if queen e7 to attack on d6, then just take with this knight on c4. What do you think? What black should do to be able to activate his light squared bishop? Of course, b5 doesn't work because of the weakness of c6 pawn. We can just play knight a5 or just take on c6 immediately. The other way to activate the bishop is to play e5. But if so, we may play d5 here. C takes d5, then queen takes d5, queen b4 check, queen d2. This endgame is in our favor because this bishop attacks on b7. That's why the bishop on c8 has to stay there to protect. But at the same time, we can increase the pressure by playing knight d6 or knight a5. So queen goes back, then queen d6. So we want to force him to trade because this is how we get our knight to d6. Rook e8. Rook d1. How to continue? Well, let's say queen f6. Castle. And now he is stuck with his pieces. You see, white can continue improving his position. For example, something like queen c7 can be played. Maybe bishop h3, rook d2 to double the rooks. So many options. Maybe even knight e3, knight d5. But for black, it's difficult to find a move. And here the best thing he can do is to play knight b6. After that, we may take on b6, take on f6, then play a3 and play this in game, which is better for us because of our pawn structure that is much better and the weakness on b7. This is a constant weakness. Of course, it's not required to trade the queens, so we can play just a3 in this position and continue to play with queens on the board. It's difficult to activate the rook anyway, and the bishop is stuck because of the weakness on b7. If, for example, he tries something like rook e6 to control the d6 square and to get our queen away, then just queen c7. Now we want to play knight d6, or just to trade our rook for two minor pieces. Rook c6 here doesn't work. There is a bishop on g2. If he plays e4 with the intention to play rook c6, then just knight d6, threatening to take here. And I don't really understand what he can do to be able to save this bishop. Maybe just queen e5. This is a possible try, but then just bishop h3. If rook e7, I believe queen d8 can be played. Or just... Oh, actually, rook e7, just queen c1 is okay. We want to take. I just don't see what he can do to be able to save, for example, this move. But then we have so many attackers. Bishop c8, knight c8, knight takes on c8. The rook is hanging. We are one piece up, so the position is winning. Of course, this line is not obligatory for black, but what black can do? So, for example, in this position, looks like black slightly simplified it. He traded two pairs of minor pieces, but now he left with his bad piece. He can't advance the b5 pawn to activate the bishop from that side. If he plays e5, then after d5, white controls the position. Okay, let's go back and try to sum it up. So here, Catalan, d takes on c3, bishop g2, c6. I recommend knight e5, and there are several moves that black can play. And if b5, we play a4. And after that, we also keep in mind the idea to play e4 when the knight is on d5. If here c5 is played, then don't forget about queen a4, knight d7, and simply knight takes on c4. Also, please analyze c takes on d4 option yourself. If knight d7, then just knight c4. Then continue your piece's development, and finally get the pawn center by advancing the pawn to e4 and forcing him to trade on c3, because your c pawn can now support the pawn on d4. And the last option, maybe the strongest continuation, bishop b4. So here knight c3, then bishop d2. Also keep in mind the idea to play e4. For example, in one of the lines it can be castle, then e4 and f4. You have to play without a pawn, but you see how strong the center is, and it's not so easy to realize extra pawn for black, even if he avoids a checkmate on the king side. Okay, thank you for your attention. In the next 3 lectures, I'll show you game analysis that are devoted to this variation, so that you will not only learn the move order, but the ideas and plans, and you can implement these plans after that in your own repertoire. Thank you for your attention.